India. We are yet to hear from the government of India as far as what their reaction is going to be. And joining us now to decode this big developing story, I'm now joined by Sunil Subramaniam. He's a market expert. Mr. Subramaniam, your first thoughts, your first reaction to what Donald Trump has announced, were the markets factoring in? And what was your reading on the matter on what these additional penalties could have been?
So I think that first of all, it's a doubling of the penalties from 25 to 50%. The second thing is that he said he's not going to stop here. This is only temporary, that if India does not fall in line, he might increase it. And third is that there was in the existing tariff order, there was a de minimis, that is up to $800 goods of small value were exempted. So with effect from August 29th, he has removed that. So this looks like a very punitive action. In fact, I would like to call it a weaponization of tariffs to achieve a larger agenda, which is to isolate Russia. I think India has got caught in this crossfire between the US, and the European Union also has taken a tough stance, I think. So I think this is more like using tariff as a weapon rather than any pure driven by any commercial considerations.
Right, Mr. Subramaniam, and this is something that's also been echoed by other countries as well. It was first echoed by China, then very recently by Brazil's President Lula also, who's called out the United States on that matter, and he suggested that he would rather speak with the Indian Prime Minister and Chinese President Xi Jinping on the matter rather than speak to Donald Trump. But help us understand, what are you factoring in for the markets tomorrow? How do you anticipate the markets to react tomorrow? Clearly, it's going to be red. It's going to be in the red territory. But what kind of, a percentage point cut are you anticipating when the markets open tomorrow?
Well, on a gap down perspective, I know it's hard to say, maybe a percentage or two. So the thing is that clearly markets had already been factoring some amount of correction. So all external oriented sectors like pharma, IT and the like were already under pressure in the markets. So how much more room is there for them to fall? But more than just the external sectors, I think this is the whole thing puts the entire Indian relationship with US in the tizzy. So it's going to affect the whole market. And I think that FIIs are probably the ones that we have to watch out for on how badly they take this and start pulling out money. And if passive funds see outflows, this could be a pain, a market-wide pain, rather than just on the tariff-impacted sectors, because passive funds invest across the index. So as you know, the banking sector, for example, is about 30% of the large cap index. So there could be pressure right across the market. Clearly, this is very unpleasant news, unexpected news, and it's not something that's going to get easily resolved, because as things stand, Mr. Ajit Doval is in Russia talking. PM has just agreed to visit Shanghai for the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So clearly, this is also a larger BRICS thing at play now. So it's going to take quite some time to solve it. I don't know whether the US delegation was supposed to be coming on the 23rd of August to come over, whether that visit is still on in the light of these punitive tariffs. So a lot of things are up in the air, which we need clarity on as the day goes by tomorrow.
Absolutely, Mr. Subramaniam. We'll have to see what really comes up, and I'd request you to stay on the broadcast with us. We're also joined by Narendra Taneja. He's a leading energy expert. He's joining us on the phone line. Thank you very much, Mr. Taneja, for joining us. What do you make of these announcements that have come in? In fact, a 25% additional penalty has been imposed upon India. But do you think that there could be room for negotiation as far as this 25% penalty is concerned? Or do you think this could be for a protracted period of time?
Well, it looks like, first of all, I'm not surprised. Knowing President Trump and how he works and, makes policies and makes announcements and then signs executive order and so on and so forth. So there is no big surprise in this. The question is, India's worry is not actually the availability or supply of oil. India's worry is always the price. And second thing is that, when it comes to oil deals, all oil deals are, done a bit in advance. Even if you're going by other spot market, deals are generally done at least 5 to 6 weeks, sometime even 2 months in advance, which means that, ships which are going to bring Russian oil or for that matter oil from any other geography, the agreements, have been in place already in June or in May and so on and so forth. So that's one aspect. Second, we have to understand that from America alone, if you look at the data of last 7 months, India's oil imports from America have gone up by 70%. And if at this rate, by December, it would have actually imports would go up by almost 150%. So India is trying what India can do. But at the same time, I think if you go by the statement released by the Ministry of External Affairs 48 hours ago, is very clear the stand that India has already taken and conveyed to the United States and to the world at large. Our Prime Minister is going to China. Our NSA is in Moscow. Foreign Minister is likely to visit Moscow very soon. So a lot of things are changing. And at the same time, President Trump's special envoy on Ukraine is in Moscow talking with President Putin. So there's a lot is going on. But the fact is that at the same time, if you go by the sentiments, in New Delhi, I mean, India is more or less prepared now. We know what might happen. And accordingly, one thing is clear, India is not going to compromise on its strategic autonomy, which means that President Trump can try what he wants to do. But at the same time, India is going to basically do whatever is in the national interest. But that said, at the same time, whatever efforts India can make in order to buy more products from the United States, including crude oil and LNG, the efforts are already on in that direction. You see, when it comes to Russian oil, Indian companies buy Russian, it's not love. It's no love for Russia. It's all economics. So if President Trump can ask American companies to sell oil to India at the same rate that Russians do, I'm sure Indian refiners will go and buy from the U.S. So it's economics. He got to understand it.
Right. We're also joined by Ajay Sahai, DG and CEO, Federation of Indian Export Organizations. Mr. Sahai, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast today. First up, can I get your inputs and your reactions to what is widely being seen as a bit of a tariff shocker yet again? If the first one wasn't bad enough, this seems to have almost compounded the problem now. Do you think this puts the Indian side in a spot really, in keeping with this continuous barrage of tariffs from President Trump?
50% tariff on Indian goods will totally outprice us in the U.S. market. Most of our competitors are having a tariff of 15 to 20%. We will have an additional tariff of 30 to 35%. And in none of the business, you have that kind of profit to absorb them. So virtually, in a way, we are looking into impact of Indian exports significantly. The good thing is that which under Section 232, they continue to be exempted by this 25% tariff also. So roughly 45% of India's exports will not be impacted. Balance 55% of the export will be severely impacted because absorbing 30% duty or so is something which is almost impossible in any of the sector.
Who should I go to? Mr. Subramanian, now I have to ask you this. Now, India has stated earlier this week that India has been targeted by the US administration and the European Union for importing oil from Russia. The question now is, how will India be reacting? Earlier we do understand that India was talking about perhaps a proposal earlier at the WTO with respect to retaliatory duties from the United States on steel and aluminum. But what's going to be India's reaction to Donald Trump's additional 25% tariffs?
I think one is that I would say that it's an iron glove in a velvet hand. We will be firm about our priorities, but at the same time, I'm not sure we're going to escalate this into a battle of words. There are not going to be tweets from our PMO's office in response to Mr. Trump's tweets. So I don't think that is in our nature. But we will be firm about our intentions. So the tariff be what it may. For example, I don't know whether we will go and do punitive counter tariffs against the US. I don't think that's the way we operate in the world. We are, Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, if you've heard the Prime Minister say it. So we will be firm about it. We will make an effort to explain to them why we are buying what we are doing. And as you say, we have already pointed out that the US buys nuclear-related chemicals from Russia. The EU is buying gas from Russia. So it's not like, they are using this as a weapon to isolate Russia and to isolate BRICS. I think there are two-pronged strategy. So I think that as far as BRICS is concerned, now this is going to bring BRICS together even more strongly, right? But at the same time, I don't think we are going to do counter tariffs. We are not going to escalate this. We will keep making our point in a very firm manner. that our purchases of oil are critical. 85% of our oil we import. Our people need to be given cheap oil. And like the previous speaker said, if America can give cheap oil, we will consider. But it's not just about oil, though today's order says that. We recollect Mr. Trump's tweet, it was also about the weapons that we buy from Russia. Now we have our whole arsenal full of Russian weapons. We need spare parts from them. We can't just shut the thing to that. So this is not such an easy thing. But I think that India will choose the diplomatic route rather than a tariff war, putting a counter tariff and going to effectively economic war with the US. I don't think that we are going to perceive it that way, but we will definitely make strong statements reiterating our stance on this whole process. But undoubtedly, US-India relationships will take a back seat. It started, right with Mr. Trump claiming that he solved the war between India and Pakistan. It continued with him hosting lunch for Mr. Asim Munir, and then he talked about digital with Pakistan. He's talking about oil with Pakistan. So clearly, he has not been giving the right signals. He's moving closer to Pakistan. He's been, alleging that he solved the war. So clearly, the diplomatic relations are not in a very strong way, and that's why we have our NSA going to Moscow and talking. PM also is going to China. So I think that we will do it, like I said, right, with a firm hand, but with a velvet glove. I'm not sure we are going to use harsh words or put counter tariffs, the tit for tat, an eye for an eye. I don't think that's in our nature, but we will try to be firm about our thing. We'll get back to the diplomatic table. I think we will continue to have invited the trade delegation to come and continue talks if they wish to do so. I think also remember that we have invited Mr. Trump for the Quad meeting, which was next to be held in India. So let's see how those things pan out. But clearly, I perceive that Mr. Trump is using this as an anti-Russia tool. So the moment US and Russia come to an agreement on the war, this might go away. So it's something beyond our control. So I just thought of that. Basically he's trying to isolate.
Before we get back to this discussion, let's quickly listen into Prime Minister Modi at the Kartavya Path where he spoke about the Indian economy. Let's listen in.
हमें मिलकर भारत को दुनिया की तीसरी सबसे बड़ी इकोनॉमी बनाना है। हमें मिलकर मेक इन इंडिया और आत्मनिर्भर भारत की सक्सेस स्टोरी लिखनी है। हमारा संकल्प होना चाहिए हम अपनी और देश की प्रोडक्टिविटी को स्केल अप करेंगे।
Right, the Prime Minister there speaking about the Indian economy. We're also being joined by Swaminathan Iyer, consulting editor at ET Now. Swami, thanks so much for joining us. Jude Sanith here. If I could just get your input on one aspect. A number of our guests here have spoken about the firmness that India has displayed by way of its resolve to the whole tariff crisis that we've been facing over the last few weeks now. But I sometimes wonder, is it really working out? It's this firmness that one might think has perhaps backfired. Do you think the country may have missed a trick or two by not talking earlier or not getting to the negotiating table sooner than they eventually did? Do you think this firmness could well have been, maybe something that India may have wanted to relook at while discussing tariffs with the US President, Swami?
I would say that this particular situation was not thought to be the key stumbling block. The notion was that this is a reciprocal tariffs issue. And the Russian oil thing, well, others were buying it too. But I think we have now come to a stage where our buying of Russian oil is so large, it is crucial to the economy. You will not be able to finesse this away easily. The truth is that if we really stop buying Russian oil altogether, and if we then buy it only from the Gulf and other sources, the price of crude oil will exceed $100 a barrel in no time. In other words, there will be a 50% increase in the price of oil if you don't buy Russian oil. I mean, I don't think they will be able to sell it to other people so easily and so smoothly as we have been doing. So this is a separate issue from the reciprocal tariffs issue. The reciprocal tariffs issue, in some sense, we were trying to manage. I think nobody was quite sure how seriously he would take this, because at one point of time, he looked quite friendly with Mr. Putin. So this huge change has caught us on the wrong foot. However, the question is, what do we do at this point, where what was thought to be a sideshow has become the key issue? As I said, there is no question of being soft good. As far as I can see, we have to buy Russian oil. If we do not buy Russian oil, the price of oil will shoot up. So there is a heavy price will be paid by us, as a matter of fact, for the rest of the world, if Russia cannot find other buyers of our volume. So this is a quandary that we cannot easily get out of. I would say that it would be wrong for India to knuckle in and say, okay, we will try to find oil from other sellers. Because as I said, if we do that, the price of oil will shoot up. We will be having various adverse consequences. And for what and for how long? I mean, I have no idea how long the Ukraine war goes on. Suppose it goes on 2 years. Are we going to deprive ourselves of cheap oil for such a long period? No, I would say, let them put tariffs on us. I mean, I think we should be very, very firm and say, look, as far as we are concerned, when you announced the sanctions, did you consult us? Did you say, we will all get together and decide? No, you on your own decide to put sanctions.
Right,
and
sir.
in effect, you're now putting those sanctions on us. And on this, I think we should be very firm that the way the sanctions were put were unacceptable to us. We therefore found another way around of buying this Russian oil by various other means. But at this point of time, it is inescapable, and we are going to stand firm because there is no question of our 100% giving up on Russian oil. The blow to us would be bad, and the blow to the rest of the world, including the United States, where also prices will go up.
Absolutely, Swami sir, and this is something that experts have stated over and over again, that this tariffs issue doesn't just impact countries, but it impacts the United States economy and, most importantly, Americans themselves. But let me ask you this question. Are these tariffs that have been announced by Donald Trump, this additional 25% duty on India, is that sustainable given the taco effect? In fact, 50% tariffs is something that he's announced on Brazil as well.
The United States imports from India are a very tiny percentage of United States GDP. And many of those items can be bought from other Asian countries or even African countries at a competitive price. So India has no leverage just on the trade side. We had this, I think, illusion that Mr. Modi has some kind of personal chemistry with Trump. There was never any basis for that. And it was always clear that what Trump was saying was, I am going to make the rest of the world pay for access to the US market, and this will give me a huge amount of taxes. He kept comparing himself with President McKinley, who in 1896, so similar things, he financed the entire spending of the federal government entirely by import duties. And this has been one of Mr. Trump's favorite things. Why don't I just screw the rest of the world for high import duties? So please understand, he's not particularly hitting only India. With some, his aim is to get money from the rest of the world. There is a calculation that they may be able to raise $300 billion per year in import tax revenue, which will hugely ease the problem of their fiscal deficit. It will, in the medium run, be a recessionary move. I think in 2026 will not be a good year for America, because if you have these very high tariffs on everybody else, there will be consequences for the American consumer. So I think Trump's calculations are wrong, just because immediately there is none of these effects. It will always take time for this to work through. The moment Trump got elected, I think all potential importers must have stockpiled huge amounts at cheap prices, saying, let us buy right before Trump's tariffs come in. And you'll find China's exports became a record. Everybody wanted to rush and buy Chinese things before the tariff wars went up. And because of these tariffs, I think, you will not have an impact on American prices until, shall we say, the end of the year. But by the beginning of 2026, I think there will be very significant inflation because of all these policies on America. At that point of time, I think Mr. Trump will be under great pressure to do something. I don't know what he will do. But understand this, he loses very little. His position is, bargaining position very strong. He loses very little. If he puts these large tariffs on India,
Right.
we could retaliate. We could retaliate,
Right, sir.
but it will hurt America only a very little. So, one way of looking at this simply is
Right, sir, but it's not just America. There are a whole host of countries that are now retaliating against the US president. So that remains to be seen. I'd request you to stay on with us as we're now joined by another guest as well. Dr. Vivek Mishra, the Deputy Director, Strategic Studies Program at ORF, is now joining us. Mr. Mishra, what does this really mean for India-US talks, which was slated to happen on the 25th of this month? A US team was expected to in India. Now, given that tariffs have assumed a larger geopolitical BRICS dimension, what is your reading on what's to happen?
Thank you for having me. I think the talks are still on. If you read between the lines on the executive order, it gives about 21 days. So technically, in the week that is 20th August, the US team is supposed to arrive. So I think the talks are on. But what comes out of it is genuinely the biggest question, because now you have a retaliation and a doubling down from Washington, clearly signaling that they want a certain kind of tariff and a certain kind of geopolitical stance from India to take. And in between these, we see a lot of interim developments. The NSA has gone to Moscow, and there's a series of lined up meetings. For example, EAM is supposed to visit annual dialogue that takes place now, subject to, and then there is, of course, the likelihood of Prime Minister visiting China. So I think diversification will be certainly on the cards. But in the immediate to medium term, the hard landing of these tariffs is something that should concern the Indian markets, as well as the Indian sectors, particularly those that will be impacted because of this tariff.
Dr. Mishra, if I could just also ask you, where do you think the Indian side will go from a strategic standpoint in the immediate future? There's been so much talk by certain experts about having an iron hand and a velvet glove, so to speak, in terms of how we ought to respond. What's your take and analysis? Is that approach viable? Is it something that India will continue to do going forward?
So I think India has signaled enough pretty well that there's no good avenue to an escalation with Donald Trump. We've seen that movie before in the Oval Office with Zelensky and all. You do that when you have leverage. I mean, China retaliated with a 145%, with over 100% tariff to the United States because they have that kind of leverage with the US. India has just a 45 billion surplus, which is not enough to be acting in that sort. So, but having said that, I think the global south and diversification around the global south axis will continue. I see India reaching out potentially to other partners in terms of diversification, be it Southeast Asia, be it Latin America, where your footprints are scant compared to other regions. I see India in the next 3, 4, 5 years to really look to these regions in terms of how they want to diversify and how they want to engage and embrace these regions. But the escalation ladder with Donald Trump is something that I think India will be cautious of, given one will have to keep in mind what kind of leverage do you have. And around 18% of your exports go to the US. What are the key sectors that will be impacted? And so I'm not surprised that the government's first order of thought is that what are the concessions that we can still make to the US to make this deal happen? And I think that's the first thought that the Indian government will be taking in sort of identifying which sectors can we really make concessions. And remember that this has been our approach since the budget. Starting from the budget in March this year, we've been signaling that this time, unlike the first Donald Trump presidency, We want to be more conciliatory because there's a recognition that there's no big harm in a calculated embrace of the capitalist market that'll open up as a result of a tighter embrace with the United States.
Right, Mr. Mishra, and that remains to be seen. Let me go back to Swami sir. Swami sir, Mr. Mishra is mentioning about a very important point, and it remains to be seen which sectors will India be open to negotiating on. We all know that agri, dairy, and GM crops are some of the sectors that India has remained, very protective about, whether it's related to negotiations with the United States or with our other trading partners and the FTAs that we have concluded earlier as well, including the United Kingdom. So, what, in your understanding, at this point in time, given that these tariffs are largely directed at India's energy trade with the US, could the United States ask for more trade to be done with the United States? And which other sectors could India be open to negotiating with the US on this upcoming trade deal?
In my opinion, I mean, it is certainly true that we thought a conciliatory stand would work, and it has not worked. So just giving in advance or being soft, it appears does not work. China, which stood up, was rewarded suitably. Various other guys have stood up much more. So I would say at this point, what is the bargaining tack you are going to have? As of now, you have nothing, because I do not think we should not give up buying Russian oil. So then what is it we can give up? All I can say is, please let us put high retaliatory taxes on America, so that as part of a deal, we can say, okay, we have given this concession to you. Otherwise, if you very limp and say, my God, what more can I do? And then you find you cannot give up on agriculture, which is one of their main objections. Then what is it that you're going to give to the Americans as part of a deal? So I would say, you please put high tariffs and say that as part of the deal, we will knock off those high tariffs, and that can be the basis for a deal.
Right, we're also being joined by Raj Kamal Rao, Managing Director of Rao Advisors LLC and op-ed columnist. Mr. Rao, if I could just ask you, you heard Mr. Swami, they're talking about high retaliatory tariffs on the United States of America, in the context of this additional 25% tariff bomb. Is that viable? What do you make of that suggestion? And do you feel it is something that India at this time and place can afford to go about imposing?
Good evening. Thank you. Who would have thought that we would be at this stage today? Nobody thought so. I mean, even as recently as 4 weeks ago, I thought everything was going to cruise along. Things were cruising along and things would be fine. I think one thing, I'm sure it has been said before, the most powerful person in the world today is not Trump, is not Mr. Modi, is not anybody. It is Zelensky. So Zelensky is driving all of this. And you know how Trump has always been very, shall we say, you rub my back, I rub your back kind of person. And once the EU and the UK signed their deals with Trump, they were able to convince Trump that he should go hard on the other countries who haven't signed up with the US. And this is not about India. This is all about Ukraine. And this is about Trump's brand. He wanted to stop the war on day one. It hasn't happened. Russia has been frustrating him. China has been frustrating him. And now, unfortunately, very unfortunately, he has added India to those pack of countries that is aiding the Russian war. And that is where we are. This has got nothing to do about trade.
Rao, this has definitely assumed a geopolitical dimension with, of course, some BRICS countries actually retaliating against Donald Trump's alleged unilateral trade and tariff policies. In fact, China has earlier called it bullying as well. But let me go back to Swami sir. Swami sir, you were talking about the China factor. Where do these tariffs really put India with respect to China, most importantly? And how does this really impact the China Plus One story that's been, turning out rather well for the past couple of years?
The Chinese immediately took it up. They said, we are not going to stand for this. So, in other words, they were determined. They saw that from the start. trying to deal with this particular man, doing it in a gentle way will not work. So they went absolutely the limit. They say, if you impose 145, we impose 145. And because Chinese economy is important to the USA, this in effect meant cutting off trade on both sides. So at that point, the United States had to come down. The whole point is that, China had something to offer in the sense of saying, okay, I will also come down from 145 and I will finally accept some kind of tariff on my thing, a low tariff, after negotiation. India is not in a position to give up anything at this point. That is its weak point. If you merely say, I will reduce the import duty on bourbon, whiskey, and a couple of other things, that is not enough. He has decided that he is going to make a geopolitical issue of oil. And on oil, we cannot afford, in my view, to give in to him. It will mean a huge increase in import prices, which will affect us adverse in various ways, including high inflation on fuel and all the consequent things. It would hugely depress the Indian economy too. So in my view, at this point, what do you have which you can give up? You can all that. If you have high retaliatory tariffs like China has, you can say, I give this up. But if you don't, are you going to give in on the import to genetically modified maize and wheat? I'm in favor of GM, so I wouldn't mind that, but I know for a fact that the government will never accept that. So if you're not willing to accept those things, I do not think you will be able to get a deal with Mr. Trump just by saying, I will cut the import duty on bourbon whiskey. You will need much, much more on agriculture, which is, I do not think the BJP can possibly accept. And he wants a cut in our oil imports from the source and making us buy from expensive sources. I do not think that will work for us. So the notion that there is any easy ground for a deal, there is no easy ground for a deal. If there is no easy ground, we have to rethink everything and say we made a mistake. From the start, we should have been tough like China. Our negotiating position is not that strong. But even now, I would say go ahead, levy high tariffs, and let them then come back to us on that. As with China, ultimately, they worked it out after both sides had raised their tariffs. I would say go ahead and do that. At this point, you have been punished in a way which nobody else has. Japan delayed things, EU delayed things. None of them was penalized seriously. We, however, are being penalized very seriously. And for something that has nothing to do with the opening thing, which is supposed to be reciprocal tariffs. So are we going to be bullied? I mean, one is the foreign policy issue of, we do want to have a line out to Russia because it has been a good supplier of defense in the past and it's been useful. So there is a foreign policy aspect that we must keep that option line or that line open. But far more important, I think, is the economic issue. Why should we undergo a 50% increase in our oil prices by giving up Russia and saying we will not allow anybody to buy from Russia, we'll only buy from the Gulf, etc. And we will send the price shooting up because we are a huge importer.
But Mr. Swamy, let's say India chooses to double down and chooses to continue to retaliate with the US. Do you possibly think that this could be a gamble that the country could ill afford? As it is, there seems to be only one way this discourse with the US side is going in terms of one tariff being imposed on another. Is this a gamble that you feel India can take and can afford more specifically at this time and place? And what happens in the event of a continued logjam between both the US and India? What's the way out thereafter?
You will be able to get out once both sides feel that there is something, we are hurting the other side in some way. And we can tell the USA, something like, I may be willing to subject myself to some quota that I will buy from the USA or somewhere. But I'm not going to be dictated that I'm going to buy no oil from Russia. I badly need that oil, and I do not want to treat Russia as an enemy. And that's a fundamental of foreign policy too. So I said economic and foreign policy. You say on this I am not going to give way. then what else will you give way on? You don't want to give way on farming? I said, the only other thing is like China. I said, okay, I impose a huge tariff upon you. And as part of a deal, I can remove that. That is the only thing you will have to bargain with. Otherwise, you have nothing to bargain with. And all the tariffs will remain in place. Trump doesn't give a damn. If Indian inflation goes high and India has a recessionary impact, he doesn't care. He says, okay, goes to you. I just want to collect large import duties from you like I'm collecting from the other guys. And what happens to your economy is none of my concern. So I would say at this point, we have to say that all the assumptions of the initial soft approach have turned out to be wrong. So let us completely change and get ourselves something which we can actually give up as part of a deal. And the only thing we can give up at this point, as far as I can see, is a high retaliatory tariff.
Swami sir, in fact, India has previously maintained, as well as government sources have told ET now that, of course, we will be looking at diversifying our trade. This is something that India has been consistently doing. The latest one coming in from Philippines, the president currently is visiting, and of course, both countries have a PTA or a preferential trade agreement. That announcement was made, in fact, just 2 days back as well. But let me go to you, Mr. Mishra. Now, Swami sir is stating that there's no easy ground on the deal. So are we back practically to square one on negotiations? And could India have afforded to have a strong position as far as bargaining is concerned, like China?
So I think, the escalation with the United States is, of course, something that I think that it was not premeditated from the very beginning. I think it because as a part of the negotiation with the 5 rounds of talk that happened, I think there was significant confidence, at least on the Indian side, that there will be a deal reached. Now, there is absolute travesty in hyphenating the idea that India stop oil and the war between Ukraine and Russia stops. I think that hyphenation is something that's a gimmick. It is something that's out of thin air because it entirely depends on Russia's stance. Today Witkoff visited Moscow. He had a bilateral with Putin, and to my imagination, I don't think there is anything substantial that comes out of it. Because the grounds on both on the Russian side and the Ukraine side are pretty clear. Now, coming back to India, if India, the option is that if there is a doubling down of 50% tariff, 25 and 25 additional, then I think virtually Washington is signaling that trade with India will be difficult. And so naturally, as a country, you will have to think of options of how you domestically signal in terms of taking a stance and how you diversify in terms of real economic, creating soft grounds for landing and diversify. Now, unlike, if you look at Brazil, for instance, they have been tariffed at 50%, but they've taken a very aggressive stand against the United States in terms of rhetoric, etc. I don't see that happening with India because I think the conversation, it's important that India realizes that the conversation happens. But meanwhile, retaliatory tariffs as an option is, I'm sure, a thought within the government. And that process may have begun in terms of how to identify areas where if we go on with retaliatory tariffs, then what are the sectors that we should go bang on?
Right. Mr. Rao, if I could quickly come over to you now. Now, as far as the Indian markets are concerned, and specifically the export sector, if hypothetically India were to tackle this issue by looking at newer markets, perhaps Latin America, South America as well, how quickly, in terms of a timeline, do you think the country and its industries have what it takes to make this pivot and look at other options so as to ease the blow? Is that something viable at this time and place? And how quickly do you see a turnaround time taking effect with regard to this pivot itself that you might want to look at as a contingency measure against these tariffs?
The most valuable exports from India worldwide obviously are in the pharmaceutical sector and, of course, the diamond industry. So that is where I think India has the potential to reach out to other markets. In fact, frankly, I would say that those are the two industries that will make Trump want to reconsider some of these tariffs. There may not be a blanket tariff, and there may be other things that he could potentially do, like he has done with Canada, where in the USMCA agreement, he has gone very hard on Canada, but he has exempted, for example, the automobile sector in part because of the agreement. So I'm still hoping that Trump will negotiate with India about the pharmaceuticals, because, as you know, the pharmaceutical sector is very important to his base here in the US. So drug prices are high, and the Health and Human Services Secretary has repeatedly said that he does not want Americans to pay very high drug prices. So my immediate concern is if the tariffs don't work. I mean, if the tariffs are imposed on India the way they are now, where will America go to source those pharmaceutical or diamond imports? So I don't think everything is over yet, but that's where we are.
Right, Mr. Rao, and remains to be seen what kind of tariffs is Donald Trump going to announce so far as pharma and semiconductor. Those two sectors are concerned. We did hear from Donald Trump yesterday when he was stating that 150% will be the beginning of tariffs on pharma, and that could also go up till 250%. It remains to be seen whether these tariffs are going to be tenable at all, sustainable at all. Swami sir, I want to ask you about the markets tomorrow. I mean, a sea of red was seen in the markets earlier when Trump announced tariffs. Now, which sectors do you expect to get impacted the most, and what's your reading on FII activity for the ongoing quarter?
I am not sure whether the markets will have any clear idea of what do we do. There remains the possibility, for instance, if India holds firm, if India does not hold firm and gives way, for instance, on Russian oil, there will be a huge increase in the price of oil. That will affect all the users of oil in various different ways. Some perhaps positively, but most of them negatively. Because that would be I mean, even if you accept any kind of quota and saying, okay, I will only buy so much of Russian oil and not endlessly. Nevertheless, it would mean, I think, you'll be putting pressure on non-oil production and prices will go up. So I think that is one factor they will have to take into account. I think the fact that relationships between the two countries have turned out to be much worse than before, it is a definite negative for the FIIs. So I think, they've been pulling out, and I think they will continue to pull out. That will be a negative. The fact that the relationship between the two countries has gone down so sharply in ways people had not expected, this has to be a negative for something.
Mr. Mishra, if I could just bring you in on this. What is the scope for, a possible TACO approach? That's something we haven't quite spoken about in great detail yet. The understanding is that the Trump will always chicken out approach could also be an option that the Indian side could explore in terms of an announcement being made with regard to tariff imposition, the US stock markets reacting adversely to it, and which would then lead to a subsequent reversal of the US president's stance vis-a-vis, said proposed tariff in the first place. Do you feel there's scope for India to simply dig its heels deep and hope that Trump will eventually chicken out or taco out, so to speak?
So I think we better not mention it, because if Trump hears this, he might go the other way. Now, there's been extensive writing in the U.S. media on the taco business, and we've seen Trump come hard at that narrative. But eventually, in practice, he's done that quite a few times, and therefore that term. But my sense is that the first July deadline was something that Trump did not hold on to and pushed it to August, and therefore the taco narrative really caught on with him. And therefore, he saw August 1 as, the August deadline is the final deadline, because if he slipped that even further, then that narrative would have grown strong. And, Trump is somebody who who cares so much about his personal image and identity. So I think, but the fact that if you keep the conversation on with the United States, which I think India is doing, and because there's a slated visit of the U.S. team to India later this month, I do remain I do have optimism in this regard that we might be able to strike some kind of a deal, although you might have to give more concessions than you initially imagined, which was 15%. But even 15% would be quite high in terms of how that positions on the Indian economy. But I do think that Trump is very capable of changing his stance. We've seen that even despite the fact that he stuck to the August 1 deadline for the rest of the world, he gave Mexico a leeway. I mean, and that too for 90 days, 3 months. So it's very much possible that Trump pushes the boundaries if he reaches the right kind of narrative, and if he has something of a placard that he can show to the world vis-a-vis the India-US relationship that he managed to galvanize.
Right, Mr. Mishra, but even as we speak, we did hear from the MEA, the Ministry of External Affairs, earlier this week, and it stated that India will take all necessary measures to safeguard its national interest and economic security. This is something that several ministries have reiterated over and over again. So it remains to be seen how these negotiation talks will proceed and whether there's going to be any sort of negotiations that will happen on August 20th. As of now, we're given to understand that negotiations are definitely underway virtually. And of course, the US side is expected to visit India on the 25th of this month. Remains to be seen the kind of concessions that could be given from India while protecting its national interest, and of course, what the United States could be open to. Let me come to you on that point, Swami, sir, since, we've been speaking of the BRICS forum, and could we then be looking at a Russia-China axis coming even closer now to counter Trump's aggressive posturing, perhaps just out of strategic necessity? All right, I'll request Vivek, if you could take that question, since Swami sir is going to be joining us in a short while. He's not on air right now.
So I think the Russia-China axis is something that has concerned the United States broadly since the Russia-Ukraine war started. It's been the axis growing between Russia and China. Now, for Trump, the question really is the BRICS, and he has come out in open and said that it's part of the reason why I'm putting these tariffs is because of the BRICS. They're ganging up. They're talking about de-dollarization, while India has made particularly clear that de-dollarization is not something the New Delhi seeks. So I think that there's been that clarity. But Russia and China, of course, they both see an opportunity. Russia is an economy that's closing the gap with the US in terms of the economic heft. Also, in terms of technology, it has leapt ahead of the US in many areas in AI and semiconductors. And it also sees this opportunity, this global fracture, as really an opportunity to band together with some other countries and create new supply chains to Latin America, to Africa, and so on and so forth. And there's always been some colonial and anti-imperialist resistance from certain geographies to the United States. So that all conjoins with the idea of how, for instance, in Africa, the whole entire coup belt, you saw colonial countries like France get out because of domestic pressure. Those are the areas that I think China gains a narrative in. Russia has an advantage over the United States, historically speaking. And this fracture particularly gives them the opportunity to create a different axis on which they can work together, be it on supply chains, be it on finances, be it on mutual financial issues, mutual trade. And then you have everything that is going on in the Middle East with countries like Iran and North Korea in the East, really coming together in terms of a group of countries that is opposed to the United States, that is opposed to the idea of the global governance and systems that we have since the Second World War. So I think you have that fracture of the global order that is even getting wider with the conflicts that are raging on, and particularly now with the tariff situation that we have in Washington.
Right. Mr. Rao, if I could quickly come back to you. You know, Mr. Mishra was talking just a little while ago about the taco equation of this all, and how there's actually a very real possibility that President Trump might, well, change his stance, like he's done several times before, making an announcement, a proposal, then going back on it. Now, should that be a possibility this time around too? Do you see there could be any chance at all that the Indian markets also adopt a wait and watch mode with regard to, going about reacting to the announcement of the 25% additional tariff, and that the markets here could also, for all you know, well, dig its heels deep and wait to see if there's more clarity that eventually emerges in what is no doubt an environment of uncertainty right now? Is there a universe in which Indian markets adopt a more of a wait and watch approach in response to the announcement?
That's a great question. There is one thing we have known about Trump. Nothing has happened until it actually has happened. So we still have a few days leeway. I would say that an important indicator here, unrelated to even tariffs, is about this B1 beta visa bond issue. As you know, there was a statement recently made by the Secretary of State and it was also entered in the Federal Register, that in 15 days' time, they're going to publish a list of countries where B1 and B2 visa holders that came to the US have overstayed. I did some research and I found that India is on that list of top 10 countries privately when I did the research. But the announcement will be made only 15 days from now or 12 days from now. If India is on that list, then that means that the abyss has widened. But if India is not on that list, that could be a positive sign. So to your question, I would say the Indian markets really have to wait and see until the tariffs actually have hit and actually they have begun collecting them at the customs ports. I don't think it's over yet.
So, Mr. Rao, you're suggesting that there's not going to be an overreaction and perhaps the markets will be in a wait and watch mode. We'll have to see how the markets react tomorrow for the exact reaction. On that note, thank you very much, Mr. Rao and Swami, sir, for your expert insights and joining us live on this broadcast. And even as we speak, a reaction from the Indian side is awaited. Of course, a measured policy approach is something that India has taken so far. It remains to be seen what's approach that it's going to take now, given that negotiations between the United States and India are still ongoing. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude this broadcast, and we're slipping into a very short break, but lots more coming up on the other side. You don't go anywhere.